All right. It looks like we are about to be all set up on Facebook. There we are. All right. So, hello, everybody. My name is Jax Finkel James. I'm the Executive Director of Texas NORML, and thank you for joining us for our January meeting. We've got some people here on the Zoom, we've got some people watching on Facebook, and today what I really want to cover is expectations and timeline for 2022, along with some information about voter guide and some federal action. So we're going to keep it pretty chill on this first meeting of 2022, as in not a ton of content, but keeping it real as in real important content. So let us start thusly. So what I want to begin with is first kind of laying out the timeline, looking ahead, what are the important dates to keep in mind for 2022, and how are things going to flow kind of politically. So as y'all know, here in Texas, we don't have ballot initiative at the statewide level, which is where our drug laws, our cannabis laws are made. And so we have to go through the legislature. We don't have the ballot initiative option to change our state drug laws. We can do ballot initiatives at the city levels to do some things on budgetary matters. But as far as actually changing the penalty, we have to go through the legislature. And because of that, we really track, candidate dates, when they need to be filing, when you need to be registered to vote, when is early voting, when are these primaries, all that good stuff. So in Texas, you're probably also familiar with gerrymandering. And there's not a lot of super competitive districts. There are competitive districts in Texas, but in general, it's quite often known if your district is going to go Republican or Democrat. And so because of that, we really encourage people to be engaged in the primary early voting. That way you have an impact on who's going to be on the ballot in a race that is most likely to go in a certain direction, and make sure that that Republican or Democratic candidate is the best, right? So primaries are the Democratic candidates, multiple running against each other for a spot, or Republicans, multiple running against each other for a position, and then whoever wins that, head off in the general election. That was a really bad wrestling voice imitation. Sorry about that, guys. New year, new voices. So you start with the primary, and then they go through the political convention cycle where they make their platform planks, which are extremely important in guiding legislators and what their priorities are during the legislature. And then, of course, there's general election, and whoever wins is able to start offering legislation low just 6 days later. So let's get going on these dates now that we have a basic outline as to how the process works here in Texas. So on the 31st of this month, 31st of January, is the deadline for you to register to vote in the primary. So Stephen is going to take a link on how to register to vote that he has and drop it in the chat for everybody that's on Zoom. If you're watching on social media, you'll see it in the description. So make sure that you are registered to vote for the primary. Now, between that deadline on the 31st of January and when early voting begins on the 14th of February, Texas NORML is going to be releasing our Texas Marijuana Policy Voter Guide. I created that back in 2012, and we've been doing it with the Texans for Responsible Marijuana Policy the last several years, and we're going to be doing it again this year. And this is where we survey all of the candidates for all of our state and federal offices to get their positions on this important topic. So that being said, we are planning and hoping to have a candidate forum on February 2nd. That will be our next virtual meeting. And so we have to work on getting that all lined up. It's still a little hectic with all of the pandemic stuff. People are doing things quite differently this year. So that is our goal, is to have it be a candidate forum on the 2nd. And then, as I mentioned, primary early voting starts on the 14th of February and ends on the 25th of February. And then on the 1st of March, that is both the Democratic and Republican primary date. So that's whenever people of the same party head off against each other to pick who is going to run in the general election. Again, extremely important so that we make sure that people that are available on the ballot are cannabis-friendly candidates. So if, let's say, in this primary election, let's say there's 3 people running for a race and there's no clear winner, but 2 people get to a certain percentage point, then they'll have what's called a runoff election, a primary runoff election, and those will happen in April and May. I won't confuse you with the dates right now, so I'm going to leave those off. But if and when that does happen in certain elections in certain districts, we will make sure to notify you about that so that you can be registered by the deadlines and make sure that you vote in that primary runoff election. Also during the summer, usually during like June and July, are going to be state political conventions. This is where delegates who are selected at the primary, or I'm sorry, the primary election, these delegates go and they decide what the platform planks are for the parties. Now, platforms are basically like a statement of principles and ideals, and they're crafted by the delegates as kind of a mandate as to what legislators should focus on. And so now I'm going to rewind real quick and say something I didn't say previously. At that primary on March 1st, if you decide that you would like to be a delegate in the summer to one of the conventions, then you would need to make sure, usually you have to show back up at 7 p.m. At your voting location to start that process. Again, we'll send out more detailed information as the time approaches, but that's generally how it works. So fast forward back to June, July, when we're at the state political conventions. The one thing I do want to say is this process of the primary elections and runoff are Republicans and Democrats only. If you're a third party or an independent person, you would not go this route. You would go through a convention process with these third parties. So just to be really clear, if you plan to vote as a libertarian or a green or any other party like that, then that is the process that you'll want to be. Again, we'll have information and emails to y'all. It's confusing, but we try to make it really clear. All right, so after the political conventions happen, then we roll into general elections. So you have to register to vote by October 11th, and then early voting will be October 24th through November 4th, and then the actual general election will fall on November 8th. Now, that is going to be an important election date here in Texas, not because anything's going to be on the ballot, as I explained earlier, but to make sure that we have good candidates. And also something I'd like to point out is that we have a really big opportunity for impact this cycle because there are well over 2 to 3 dozen legislators, both in the House and Senate, that are not planning to run for re-election at this time. And so that's going to be freshman legislators potentially replacing them. And so this is a great opportunity to find out how they stand on the issue and then hold them accountable during the legislative session. As I mentioned earlier, just 6 days after the general election, pre-filing will begin, and then the legislative session starts in January. So we are 1 year away from the legislative session, and as I have said to you guys many, many times, sometimes the interim is just as important as the legislative session. In fact, not sometimes, all the times, because it's really important in these downtimes that we're engaging not only with candidates, potential candidates, but regulators, medical cannabis opportunities to enact with having trouble speaking, regulators, also hemp regulations, all that, building relationships so that during the session, whenever you go into an office, people know who you are, because during the session, people are very busy at the Capitol, and they don't always have the time that they're going to have during the interim where you can go into a legislator's office, usually in district, and have a meeting with potentially them or their staff. It's a lot harder during the legislative session. So I just want to set that up, that during this next year, while you're engaging in this political process, please make sure that you are doing as much relationship building as possible to set us up for success for 2023, because that will be our next opportunity to change the laws here in Texas. I see a couple comments here on Zoom. Thank you for putting those dates and those links in there, Stephen. I did not bring pie and punch either. Sorry about that. But Stephen, I think you're also watching the Facebook comments. If there's any questions there, would you make sure to drop them in here for me? I would really appreciate that. All right, so I'm going to keep rolling because I just see some comments and not too many questions yet. Appreciate that, guys. So what I want to talk about now is some federal actions that you can participate in right now. If you are watching on the Zoom, I will ask Stephen to please drop that in the comments. But if you're watching on Facebook, you'll find that in the description. And you'll see there is still the MORE Act is available. And the MORE Act actually passed the House Judiciary Committee on September 30th with a bipartisan vote of 26 to 15. Now, in the previous congressional session, members of the House of Representatives made history by passing the MORE Act and repealing, which would repeal prohibition and criminalization of marijuana. So I just want to give some perspective on some of the changes that the bill would make. And it would facilitate the expungement of low-level federal marijuana convictions and incentivize state and local governments to take similar actions. It would create pathways for ownership opportunities in the emerging regulated industry. It would also allow for veterans for the first time to obtain medical cannabis recommendations from their VA doctors that have established medical cannabis programs. It would remove the threat of deportation for immigrants that have been accused of minor marijuana infractions who are gainfully employed in the state legal cannabis industry. It would also provide critical reinvestment grant opportunities for communities that had suffered disproportionate rates of marijuana-related enforcement actions. And then also protecting and respecting basic rights and civil liberties of cannabis consumers under the federal law when it comes to public benefits. So those are some of the things that the MORE Act would do. So if you're going to click on norml.org/act, click on that, and there's a nice little pre-populated letter there for you that you can edit as you see fit. Now, next one that I would like to highlight is an action regarding President Biden. The request is for him to follow through on his commitment to expunge marijuana records. President Biden was very clear on the campaign trail when he stated that I think we should decriminalize marijuana, period. And I think anyone who has a record should be let out of jail, their records expunged, and be completely zeroed out. And I think that it is past time for him to get this done. So if you would also click that link, you can again use the pre-formatted letter for you or edit it as you see fit. Now, the most recent one that I want to bring up and highlight is a Republican representative who introduced legislation to repeal federal marijuana prohibition. Republican Representative Nancy Mace from South Carolina and multiple co-sponsors have introduced the States Reform Act. This is a comprehensive bill that repeals the federal prohibition of marijuana, expunges federal nonviolent marijuana crimes, promotes local ownership in emerging regulated industries, and places certain restrictions on the advertising of regulated cannabis products, among other federal reforms. Separate legislation to narrowly amend federal laws have previously been offered by Republican lawmakers, but the State Reform Act marks the first Republican-led effort in Congress to provide expansive relief to those who have suffered under the cruelty of prohibition. So this bill does so by releasing those who are currently incarcerated for federal nonviolent marijuana crimes and by providing criminal record relief to those who have been formerly convicted of these same specific violations. So again, click on norml.org/act and select any of those federal actions that you would like to participate in. A few other things to let you know is that, of course, here at Texas NORML, we had a very interesting 2021 legislation. Interim charges were, I'm sorry, not interim charges, regulatory interaction, lots of fun and exciting things, including a pandemic. So we actually recently made a video that you can check out on our YouTube, our end of year video recapping some of our stuff. It was a year that felt like a long year. And so I have to say, when I watched it and I remembered that 420 live stream that we put on, I was like, yeah, that was cool. So I hope you guys will take a moment to check it out. And I don't know if you can see, but I'm wearing my cool Texas NORML shirt. So you can also go to Texas NORML, click shop, and we have some really great shirts, a new shirt that came out. And just to let everybody know, if you want to become a member of Texas NORML, you absolutely can. And we will be getting our new membership items in just a few weeks. And those are going to be some amazing tumblers with the Texas NORML logo, and it says Member 2022. And only Texas NORML members get these pint glasses. So glass tumbler, whatever you would like to call it. So I will encourage you to click on all those links, support us so that we can continue supporting marijuana law reform here in Texas. I'm going to check my comments again real quick while we're here. Debbie, she wants to know, do you really think that Biden would act on this here in Texas? Well, Debbie, when Biden would take that action, it would be a federal action and it would address people with federal charges. And so at a federal level, yes, I absolutely hope that he would do it. I do know that there have been a lot of mixed feelings on what kind of champion he would be on this issue, even though he's spoken positively about it. So hopefully if we continue to press, we can get some more out of him. All right. I feel that Attorney General Dan Patrick is bullheaded about decriminalizing cannabis. My son went to get a medical cannabis card due to PTSD. Yes, so PTSD has been added. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick blocked it from being added back in 2019, and did add it in 2021. And so our next opportunity is going to be in 2023. So to speak to Roxy, who just said we need state legislation, yes, we absolutely do. And as I mentioned in the timeline earlier, we'll start seeing bills filed in November of this year. So about 10 months from now, bills will start to be pre-filed. And then the legislative session will start in January of 2023. Here in Texas, we have a 2-year cycle. So we only meet every 2 years. And that's why it makes the interim so important for that relationship building. All right, any other questions before I bid y'all adieu? Anything from Facebook, Stephen? I think you might have already responded to that. All right, well, on that note, guys, I'm going to say thank you so very much for joining us tonight. It is short and sweet, and I hope that you all had an amazing holiday and a wonderful new year. Welcome to 2022, you guys. Hopefully, we will have a really wonderful year. And I wanted to say on a personal note, I've recently started working as the state, excuse me if I could speak for just a second, my bad. I recently started as the state policy manager with NORML. So I am now working in a capacity to help all of the states across the country to try to instigate actions on these types of things. You guys have been so supportive of all the work that we've done here in Texas. You know, we have a really big uphill battle here, and y'all have really done a tremendous job. And so I want to thank everyone for working with me, continuing to work with me. I'm definitely going to be with Texas NORML through the 2023 session, but I am excited to be able to work with and help the chapters across the country on legislation that's being filed. And for a lot of these other states, their sessions are happening. But for us here in Texas, our next chance is January 2023. So I'm going to leave you with these takeaways. Register to vote. Vote in your primaries. Vote in the general election. And make sure that you do relationship building with your current legislator in your district and whoever it is that you plan to vote for in that district as well. So thank you, everyone. I appreciate y'all for joining us tonight. Thank you, Stephen, for helping me get all the comments and all of that. And I will see you guys in February. Good night.